Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Aussie Ideas Man.
This is our current plan to production, cash flow positivity, and beyond. We're working right now to raise the $65 million we're talking about for 2024. Obviously, we're continuing our crowdfunding through this Reg CF, and we have an accredited round for Reg D investors. And with U.S. capital support, they'll fill in the rest of the funding needed for us to start production. But that first part of our plan, this 2024 raise, gets us to completing production intent vehicle builds, and it gets us to start a production and cash flow positivity. Specifically, the PI builds, we see it being a 10 to 16 vehicle program. Some of those vehicles may be used for multiple steps. It really depends on how the suppliers are ready to receive those vehicles, and sometimes their scheduling for validation and testing may not line up with certain vehicles, so it may take more vehicles because some suppliers may overlap. But if they run nice and organized, then maybe we can take a vehicle from one supplier and then just ship it to the other supplier, from testing the HVAC system to testing the ABS system. We We'll also be able to complete all of our electrical systems. We have most of the control of that here because we control all of our own I/O boards. We control the infotainment computer. We control kind of all the electronics, the code, software, the firmware that runs the vehicle. So we're not beholden to any outside entities for that, but we have to fund that ourselves and finish the work here ourselves.
Now, this is all waffling, and I think the slide that they're using here is just there to impress the gullible. Years ago, I was in the army, and I often heard this saying, bull baffles brains, and I think they're doing this right now. He's waffled on all about stuff that we already know, and it's got nothing to do with investment, but it's just like padding, as if a 1 hour investment seminar constitutes a good one. And so he's throwing out all of this old stuff to fill the hour. Now, I'm going to make a point that I thought of, and I don't think anybody else has thought of it. I just haven't had a place to raise it. But seeing that this is now this funding stage of getting $65 million for production, I want to make the point that had Sarah Hardwick quit to concentrate on her own business and APTERA Motors weren't switching to US capital, then I would believe that she was genuine about it. But because shortly after they switched to US capital and the crowdfunding is finished, I believe APTERA Motors were going to let go of her services like they've done for so many others on their staff. I believe they were going to let go of her services and were kind to her and said, you better quit now of your own accord and pretend you're going to be concentrating on your own business. Because when she did quit, she already knew that this deal was coming up with US capital. She knew about it. And so I think she was driven out rather than voluntarily left. And nobody has even brought that up. But I don't think it's pure coincidence that shortly after she leaves, her services aren't really needed anyway. This was all known before she left. I believe there's a very good chance she was shoved and was just allowed to look like she wasn't, both for her benefit and for the benefit of this scumbag company that shoves people all the time.
Ourselves. And obviously, impact testing, crash testing, we're going to share that information with you as soon as we have it, but some of those PI builds will be destroyed for science, and we'll be able to learn a lot from those. But our simulation tools are so good now. And a lot of, even automotive manufacturers, they don't have to crash test a lot of vehicles because the simulation tools are so good to show you exactly what's going to happen, what's going to fail, and how the vehicle's going to act in impact sequences.
I would like to know what authority actually allows simulation to completely override real crash tests. He's made the statement, but I'm inclined not to believe it. I would really like to know under what conditions simulations override real tests.
Our path to start a production and cash flow positivity is really about filling this building full of equipment and tooling and jigs and assembly stations to get the vehicles rolling. This current part of the plan is really to ramp production up to about 6,000 vehicles a year. Obviously, everything in this building is capable in one shift of producing 10,000 vehicles a year, so we're set up for that. But really, Blake's amazing job at creating our financial model has this first raise getting us to a production volume of about 6,000 vehicles a year, and that is cash flow positive. So that's kind of our first.
There have been plenty of people that have analysed the Carlsbad location and have come to the conclusion that it neither has the space to hold sufficient parts inventory or completed APTERAs before they can be trucked out, nor does it have the infrastructure to allow the amount of trucks that will be coming and going to furnish this enterprise.
First big next milestone is get the vehicle into production, then get the cash flow positive. As soon as you're not burning money, it makes life just a lot easier. This first raise also unlocks the rest of the California Energy Commission money to buy our solar and battery equipment here. It's a matching grant, so we have to put in money to receive money from the California Energy Commission. So this capital raise does that. It also unlocks a lot of equipment financing. So as soon as we start to fill the facility and become a more valuable company, it's easier to get other financial companies to finance big pieces of equipment. So some of the assembly robots and some of the jigs and stuff for assembling the vehicles in station, some of that stuff can be financed. It's usually financeable because you can sell it to somebody else if you ever didn't need it any longer. Like a lot of things, if it has kind of residual value, then the banks will loan on it. So we're hoping to be in a position with this raise to do a lot of that. Beyond that, looking into 2025, 2026, we're really talking about growing out of this plant, scaling beyond 20,000 vehicles a year, looking at IPO strategies, Department of Energy, grants and loan programs. We've been talking with a lot of international agencies in Europe, Italy, the Middle East, about grants and loan programs in those areas. But how do we grow from a facility that can produce 20,000 vehicles a year into many facilities that can produce 150,000 APTERA a year? So our goal is to spread solar mobility as far and wide as possible, and that means getting production numbers up as high as we can. That'll require multiple factories. So right now, Blake's our financial model shows about $200 million for that expansion effort, and then looking beyond that into building factories all the way out to 8 factories. We think in 2026 to 2030, we can really start to increase our margins and enhance our free cash flow and be operating out of 6 to 8 plants in that time frame. And that gets us
All very grand, and it's to impress the gullible, but there's no substance to it whatsoever. If we look at history, they have had about 5 years trying and failing completely, plus another almost 5 years and heading for failure. So there's no point talking so grand as this. He needs to come down to earth and live in the real world.
It's up to 140, 150,000 units of production a year. Did I leave anything out, guys? Any questions coming in that I should answer while we're talking about this particular slide?
There's a question about the first 3 to 6 months
This is all very amateur.
of production. They're wondering, can you give us an idea of the production ramp over the first?
We will talk about the production ramp in future slides, but it is kind of a 6-month ramp. It could be accelerated, if supply chain allows. It's mostly how quick can we get in the parts and pieces of the APTERA to actually really ramp the production of the APTERA. So, but right now it's kind of a 6-month ramp to be at real volume production from when we start to commission the line and start to move vehicles down the line and prepare ourselves. It could be as little as 3 months.
There's also just a question about the U.S. capital funds being available to APTERA.
Yeah, U.S. Capital is helping us to raise the remainder of our production funding needs. So we hope that this crowdfunding will go well. That's why we're all here talking about this. We'll talk about the specifics of the remaining crowdfunding at the end here, but basically we'll net some investment from the crowdfunding, and U.S. Capital is there to raise the rest of that money. It's a process. It will take some time, but we're hoping July and August that's in full swing, and as we get into after August, we'll be able to start deploying that capital as we.
Now he's into the hoping certain dates will bear fruit. Now, let's go back to 2020, where they were definite about certain end dates, production dates. They were pretty definite, and they did this repeatedly for at least 3 years running. Now they've reverted to just hoping, and they are vague, very vague about dates. It can easily be construed that December 31st, 2025 is their date to hand over a card for ownership of a first APTERA, and that's not good enough. Not after so many false promises. Nobody should pay heed to his hoping on dates.
We have deployed the accelerator capital and the crowdfunding capital that we've received to date. Technical and sourcing. So now getting into, okay, we have a funding path, we have the money to do this. How do we align all the partners that we need to fill this facility with the parts and equipment tech?
They don't have the funding path or the money to do it, particularly the money to do it. That doesn't exist at all at the moment. The funding path is on a wing and a prayer.
Actually produce these vehicles. We have amazing strategic partners. We've obviously talked about CPC in Italy quite a bit. They've been amazing at making our body structures, our binks, but also aligning us with other suppliers for things like the chassis and suspension parts. They have a whole ecosystem of suppliers in Europe there.
Now this is interesting because, first of all, where's the Laffy? The motors are pretty important to this thing. There's 3 of them on the launch edition. And where is Alafi? And if Alafi isn't there, where's the motor supplier? Wouldn't a motor supplier be a strategic supplier or a strategic partner? It's not there. Where's Yazaki? Yazaki is supposed to be the wiring harness or loom that is in that PI-1 that sits behind him, that arrived on April Fool's Day, and 9 weeks later, they still haven't reported on getting any wiring loom into it, let alone all the other things that they're supposed to see would fit in the cabin. So there, no Alafi, no Yazaki in their strategic partnerships. There's something strange going on. This Hirschler Automotive, somebody should check and see if Hirschler is the Spanish provider for glass, because as far as I know, the glass comes from Spain, and Hirschler really doesn't sound like a Spanish name. So what's going on there? Costamp for the chassis. First time I've ever heard of them. And of course that Munro is one of the, I guess, highlighted strategic partner. He's a very silent man and has been for about a year. I think he's realised that he needs to distance himself from APTERA, although APTERA still pretend that he's involved. Then there's Cherry. In Australia here, Cherry has had, I think, at least 3 attempts to introduce themselves to the car market in Australia. The first 2 failed. They came and they went because their cars were substandard, and I mean really substandard. That's why they had to leave. Now, they may have lifted their game because they've come back again and they're making a fist of it for a 3rd or possibly 4th time. I don't know. I don't take too much interest in Cherry because the road tests are usually poor. The road test results are usually very poor. And I have seen a couple of road test results for their Armada and a couple of other machines that they've introduced recently, and they are still on the poor side. They're not that great. So we'll see what sort of Cherry components are put in the APTERA if ever it comes to be. Bye for now. Stay safe.